and I'm here today with my Austin Allegro from 1974. If you haven't seen her before, she's a 1.3 Super Deluxe Series 1 with the Quartic steering wheel. I've been asked a few times by different people, are the Allegros easy to work on? Are they easy to get parts for? And also, another question I've been asked is, what sort of classic car would make a good starter classic? So, I love my old Rovers, but they are over-engineered. They can be quite heavy, complicated, and as much as I would always recommend a Rover, maybe not as your first classic. My first classic was a Mark 1 Ford Capri, and I'd always recommend Ford, but the prices of these old Fords now are stupid. No offence to any Ford owners out there, you're very lucky, you have a good money earner there. The Allegros are still very affordable, very much an affordable classic. In many ways, they're affordable to buy and they're affordable to run and maintain. It's a no-brainer to me. So this fella here is the A series engine. This engine was used for years, and I'm not a Wikipedia reader, so I'm not going to give you all the facts. If you really want to know about the A series engine, I'm sure you can look up on Wikipedia yourself. But this engine was used in Morris Minors, Austin A35s, of course the famous Mini. That's what this engine is well known for. Many people call it a mini engine. It was in the Allegro, the Metro, all sorts of cars, and you could really tune these engines up. The Cooper S Mini, they had the twin carbs and all sorts, and my friend's got a special head on his engine that's got the exhaust manifold on the opposite side to the inlet manifold, because on this one the carburetor is mounted above the exhaust manifold, which isn't great in some sense, because you know the carburetor will get hot, etc. Fuel can evaporate, but it works. It's worked for many years. This is the transverse, so it's front wheel drive. On things like the Morris Minor, the engine was mounted the other way because they were rear wheel drive, and they would have had a prop shaft on, whereas this doesn't have prop shafts, it has drive shafts. So what I'm doing today, I'm just giving this engine a little service. I'm going to check the tappets, I'm going to change the oil, I might change the spark plugs, but I don't think it was that long ago I changed them, so I might just pop them out, look at their condition, give them a little clean. Coil is quite new, so I don't need to touch that. We'll have the distributor cap off, and we'll just check the rotor arm, make sure the cap's nice and clean and healthy. I'll check the coolant for its strength and levels. We'll have a look at the brake fluid, make sure that looks clean, clutch fluid as well, and the thing a lot of people forget to check is the dash pot oil in the carburetor. So yeah, we'll have a look at a few little things, and I just want to show you how easy it is to look after one of these engines in specifically an Austin Allegro. If you have this engine in a Mini, it's a lot more cramped. There's not a lot of room to move at all. I can't remember exactly because I've never worked on a Mini myself, but to get to the distributor I think you've got to take like the grill out and stuff. Am I right? Because the radiator's mounted here on the side, which is just so cramped if you want to change something like the fan belt. Yeah, I don't think the Mini, did the Mini have an electric fan? I'm not sure, but the Allegro here has got electric fan from standard, which I think was a bit of a rarity back then, because a lot of cars had the fan running off the fan belt. That's why they called it a fan belt. We now call these belts the auxiliary drive belt, because that's what they do. They drive the auxiliaries. They would drive on Peggy, I think it's just water pump and alternator. But on modern cars now, you've got air conditioning pumps, you've got power steering pumps, you've got all sorts of things running off the auxiliary drive belt. But to me and you, we know it as a fan belt. Anyway, let's get stuck in. So the first thing I'd like to do when servicing an engine, we'll drain the oil out first. I mean, people have got different ways of doing it. I know Peggy's just been sat here, so all the oil's settled down into the sump. So when I take the sump plug out, all the oil's just going to drain out that hole. I know some people, particularly in the winter, they like to run the engine first and get the oil warm, because then the oil sort of pours out a lot faster. And for whatever reason they think, you know, it could flush the engine out, I suppose. I say this, it's up to you how you do it, but I know she's just been sat here, so I'm just going to drain that oil straight out the sump and go from there. Now the dipstick on this A-series engine here is a little bit awkward to get to because of all these plugs out, the plug leads in the way, so I normally take off number 3 plug lead, and then I can easily get the dipstick up and down without that lead in the way. So look at the colour of that oil. I don't run a strict service schedule. I like to look at the dipstick and just see the colour of the oil, and that is dark. To me, that is definitely time for an oil change. Now to check your oil, if you're just checking it, you want to wipe this stick and dunk it back in and see where the mark is, because at the moment you can see it's sort of splurged all over the max and the min, so we're not really sure where the level is. So if I just quickly give it a wipe, sorry I couldn't do that with the one hand because I'm holding you in my hand. I could use a camera stand, but I like holding you, you know. So while we're dunking back in, we bring it out. So yeah, it's just above the minimum, so if you weren't going to change the oil, you definitely want to be topping it up. Normally, as a rule, on most cars, between the maximum and minimum line is a litre, but don't take that for gospel. It's just to give you a rough idea. So if it's just above minimum, I would put, if you've got a little 1 litre bottle, I'd put a quarter in, let that settle, and then check it again, because you don't want to overfill the engine because you'll end up with it smoking and all sorts. This could be my new series. Here we are under the car, quite happy looking underneath. Peggy's been sat here and she has not leaked oil. There's something there, a little bit of oil, and I bet that's out the gear selector seal. Always the gear selector seal. This little bit of oil down here, if you can see it, that's just me where I was dripping the dipstick. So this is a 5/16 spanner that fits on there. I'll probably need to get a socket on it, but this is the sump plug. Oh, I did it. There we are, that's loose, so I will go and get my oil can. Now, it is very tight, you could jack the car up, but my oil can does fit under here. So, and I've got a glove on now because I know, oh, she's not letting me have it. She's not letting me have it. Come on, you. Give me that sump plug. I don't know why I bought a spanner out, really. I mean, I just couldn't be bothered to look for a socket, I think. Be a lot easier with a socket and a ratchet, wouldn't it? Or a ratchet spanner or something. I mean, it's got to be a nice tight thread, hasn't it? Because otherwise it would be leaking oil out everywhere, wouldn't it? Right, it's feeling loose now. Here she comes. Ah! Glug, glug, glug. Drip, drip, drip. Yeah, that was definitely due a change, wasn't it? Now, if I come out of here, I'll show you something gross. This is the sump plug, and it's not just a sump plug, it's also something to collect swarf. So if you can see, it looks a bit spiky. This, worryingly, is pieces of your gearbox. Because the gearbox is in the sump, the gears do shed a little bit of what we call swarf, so very fine particles of metal basically, and to stop them going up and clogging up the oil pump and clogging up the engine, they've put a magnet on the end of this sump plug, so any little particles of swarf collect on the end of this plug. So we must give this a very good clean before we put it back in. Whilst all the oil is glugging out, I have cleaned the sump plug. Now you could get a new sump plug. Really, on a lot of cars you replace the washer. It's normally copper, so it sort of crushes and makes a good seal and doesn't leak. On this sump plug you can't get the washer off, which is really annoying. So I can't just change the washer, and I haven't got another sump plug, and I think it's a bit wasteful to replace the sump plug when it's absolutely fine with the magnet on there and everything. So what I do is give it a good clean up, and then I use this stuff. I'm sure I've shown it to you before. Here we are. PTFE tape. I know some of you are going to be like, oh, don't use that. Well, I've used it for years and I've never had a sump plug leak and I've never had issue. So I will continue to use PTFE tape. So it's plumber's tape, right? I don't even know what PTFE stands for. So just wrap it around the thread. Wrap it around as much as you want, really. I'll give it a few turns. So it's got a nice coverage on there. There we go. That should do it. So it just gives it a little extra seal just to stop any oil escaping. So my sump plug's all ready. I've got my spanner ready to put it back on, but she's still trickling that oil out, which is absolutely fine. As I say, if you had run the engine prior and the oil was warm, the oil would come out a lot quicker, so the job would be done faster. But I'm not in a rush. I've got my tappets to check yet, so I might as well just let that drain as much as it wants whilst I check the tappets.